Welcome to NTTS Leadership. I'm Jane King.
And I'm Matt Doherty. And with us today is the president of IMG Academy, Tim Pernetti. Welcome, Tim.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. You had a lot of great leadership experiences along the way. Tell me, what is your philosophy as a leader at IMG Academy?
Well, I think my philosophy in leadership has developed over years. And you're around people where you learn good leadership traits, and I think you learn some things that you probably prefer to leave in the trash. But over time, I don't think it's just been the academy. Over time, I've developed my own style, and I've tried to apply it everywhere. It starts with transparency. I think that generally people are reluctant to share information about their business, about their company at a leadership perspective, unless it's on a need-to-know basis. But being transparent makes people feel more invested in what you're doing. I'm big on accountability, starting with myself. Like, everybody has a boss. I expect to be held accountable. I hold people accountable, and part of holding people accountable is making sure things are very clear. What you expect is very, very clear.
Accountability, I think, is one of the biggest challenges for all leaders. How do you do that? How do you hold somebody accountable?
It starts with the first conversation. I went to IMG Academy in March of 2020 during COVID and inherited 1,000 employees, nobody that I really knew, and I had to get to know people. But once I had my arms around it, it starts with setting very clear expectations. Like, I think the big problem we have in leadership oftentimes is people don't understand what the expectations are. So when there is failure or success, nobody's really sure how you got there. But it starts with being very, very clear, setting expectations, and then you have to revisit the expectations. And honestly, you have to tear down the walls and have the conversation, revisit them when things aren't going well. But number one rule in leadership is your people need to know that you care about them and you have their back. Like, my people know that I'll fight for them, but they also have to know it's not personal. When you revisit expectations and talk accountability, it's not personal. It's about what you're trying to achieve together.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting you mentioned accountability, because even if you own a business, you're still accountability to customers, or, so that everybody's accountable to something. And what would you say are your proudest leadership moments that you've had?
Oh, wow. There's been a lot of things that I've accomplished that I'm proud of, and there's been a lot of failures that I really learned from, which have been even more valuable. But professionally, I would say the two I would put at the top of my list would be, I was part of the launch of arguably one of the last linear sports networks. It was a college sports cable network called CSTV. And it wasn't about, building it. They hired me when I was 30 years old to do all the deals and bring in all the rights. But the night we flipped the switch and turned that network on, I just got chills everywhere in my body. And then I got scared because I realized we weren't going to be able to turn it off if something went wrong. But that was one. And then later on in my career, I went back to my alma mater at Rutgers to serve as athletic director, which was arguably one of the hardest leadership challenges I ever had. But I was on a mission to get Rutgers into the Big Ten. And the day that I woke up and went to that press conference and looked down the barrel of those cameras, it was amazing. But I got to be honest with the two of you, the proud moments I have in leadership happen every single day. I write 25 handwritten notes a week. I make phone calls to people, and I get them in return. And when I get an email, or I get a text, or I get a call, or somebody sticks their head in my office to say thank you, those are the most validating leadership moments to me.
Well, you were successful. I just want to mention getting Rutgers in the Big Ten, because they always beat my Boilermakers in basketball. So
sorry about that. The only thing I promised is I couldn't guarantee the results. I'd get them in, but the results were up to the coaches. So
you talk, and this is something I love to hear, and the admission of the rough patches, the adversity. You go back to your alma mater. Sure. You're the athletic director. You've got things rolling until they don't. Mm-hmm. And then you're asked to leave. Mm-hmm. What did you learn in that experience, going through adversity, mm-hmm. Not hitting adversity and stopping? What did you learn, and what lessons do you use today as the president of IMG Academy?
I think you learn to stay in the moment. Because that moment I just described to the two of you, I had this vision of something, and then you see it happening before your eyes. It's the high of highs in any professional career. Something that you knew, you could see it, you knew there was a path to it, and you achieved it. And then 3 months later, I was out of a job. So it really taught me to stay in the moment. It also taught me that whole experience, because 7 days after that press conference, I saw this tape of this basketball coach and his behavior. What I learned at that moment, and when I ultimately was fired from that job, was to trust my gut. Because I knew when I left that meeting what had to be done, but instead of going and doing it, I tried to figure out how I was supposed to run through a process by the book and make sure that a university that I love, that gave me an opportunity to go to college, that we did everything by the book. But I really learned to trust my gut. And quite honestly, Matt, it was a real character moment for me, because I think at times like that, it was visceral, it was public, it was national. I got sick of seeing it on television. And when I had eventually talked to the media, I had one shot to make sure people know who I was. And that was really challenging to do.
How do you rebound from that? How do you get that next job? Because, here you are, one of the hottest ADs in the country, and then you're not.
Right.
And now you got to go and kind of dust yourself off and get back on the saddle. How did you reinvent yourself?
I didn't know how to do it, because during that week, as I saw what was about to happening, I felt like I would be unhireable, not just in college athletics, but in the business.
Right.
And I think it was a normal reaction to have. But if you can picture, getting fired, going home, trying to look presentable, and walking to the end of my driveway with satellite trucks, and that 50-yard walk, like the North Jersey Italian came out in me, I was thinking about all the things I could say and all the people I could talk about. Right. But when I got to the end of the driveway, I thought, here's my moment to start the narrative about who I am. And in that moment, I talked about being sad and my role in it, and I accepted responsibility for the role I played in it, and I never spoke about it again. And I had my first job offer 8 hours later. And what I realized was I did something right. Like that 50-yard walk and all the thoughts that I had, and coming to the determination that this was the one chance I was going to get to show people who I was and what my character was, started the process. And then from there, you dust yourself off, you reconnect with people in the industry, and you suddenly realize it's going to be okay.
Yeah. Well, and you sound like you kept calm and were strategic, even in a moment, and that was really what kind of brought you through that difficult time.
At that moment, I was calm, and I say it was a little strategic. I don't know, I had a lot of calm moments during that week, because it was an emotional roller coaster, and my family had to go through it. It was challenging, but when it was all over, I almost felt instantaneously when I turned and walked back towards my house that it was going to be okay. And if you could just illustrate that character for a short period of time, because had I done something different, the path would have been different. I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you two about it.
Someone that Dr. Kevin White, gave me advice one time, said, take the high road, there's less traffic up there. And that's what you did.
Yeah.
That 50-yard walk. I mean, we should label this segment the 50-yard walk.
Should have trademarked it, right?
That's
yeah.
It should be your book title.
It should be.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. In those moments, we all need mentors and a personal board of directors to guide. When you lose that job, 75% of your Rolodex for the 50 and older crowd gets wiped out. Who was there for you to help you navigate that tough time?
So many great people. And I have a long list when it comes to thinking about who has mentored me in the business. And people always think like mentors have to be much older and have much more experience. A lot of the people I would call mentors are around my age. And early on, I didn't get a lot of return calls from people that I expected I would, which was disappointing. But a couple people jump out in particular. John Littner, who was one of my first bosses at ABC Sports when I was a young guy who literally knew nothing, but I wanted to work in sports. He's now president of the Yes Network. John was my boss, and he taught me the value of relationships, and he taught me about how to approach negotiations productively, how to deal with difficult situations. And John was on my phone pretty quick after that happened. Chris Bevilacqua, who was my partner at CSTV. Chris is John and Chris, ironically, John introduced me to Chris when I was 25 years old. They have been my go-to people, throughout my career. And then as it moved forward, there's just more and more people. Like I'm always indebted to the folks at Manchester City and the New York Yankees. They gave me a chance to 6 months later come in and launch an MLS team in New York. And instead of everybody dancing on eggshells about what happened at Rutgers, they sat me down and said, tell me how you feel about what happened. And I thought, okay, these guys understand. So along the way, people will disappoint you, but the people that are in your life throughout that know who you really are will always be there for you.
What advice would you give your younger self?
Oh, so much advice.
I know, we all would. Right?
So many things. I think listen more. You know, when I was a young programming executive at ABC Sports, I was in a high profile place. You picture getting out of graduate school and then 6 months later you're at the Super Bowl. Like, it was just, the business was intoxicating almost, because you're around so much high profile stuff and events and people. But you want to do really, really well. And having been a college athlete, I had a perfection problem, not realizing that nothing is ever going to be perfect. So I would listen a little bit more. I think that's number one. Along the way too, I think that you learn good lessons and you learn challenging lessons. I think I would have had the guts to make more risky decisions when I was younger than I actually did. I took a little bit of the safer, more convenient road, which didn't really hurt me as much, but I've been in environments since then that have been risk-oriented where we encourage it. And like, that's the way I lead. I take risks every day because I want the people around me to feel comfortable taking risks, knowing 50% of them are going to screw up. And that's okay, because the world doesn't end when they do.
It sounds like you have an opportunity that you're thinking about that you passed up at a younger age. What maybe is an example of an opportunity you wish you would have taken?
It's a good question. I feel lucky to have had the path I've had, because I've had awesome stops. I've done a million different things. I've been able to lead in jobs I never thought I would have access to. Like, really, it has been a dream ride for me, and it's not over by a long shot. But I remember early on, there was a company called Sportsline, which was an online sports provider, which CBS eventually bought. It became CBS Sportsline. There was an opportunity for me that I didn't pull the trigger on because I felt like it was a little risky. It required a geographical move, which I don't think I was ready to do. And the company got bought by CBS, blew up. Everybody there made a lot of money, which wasn't really the most important thing to me at the time. But I felt like that was a risk I wasn't really ready to take at 25 years old. I'm not saying I wish I had, because
Right.
my path worked out for me great to this point, but it is one that I think about often.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about, you've mentioned some influential people.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit more about that. Have there been books, anything that's kind of helped guide you philosophically?
The name Armen Keteyian always jumps into my head when people say, who was one of the most influential people in your career? And Armen is well known for all the books he's written, for all the sports he's covered on HBO Real Sports, and he's sort of like on the hard edge of sports and news. Armen spoke at a class that I was helping to teach when I was in graduate school at Rutgers. And I remember at the lunch after asking him for a business card, and in 2 minutes, maybe less, showed him how passionate I was about wanting to get into television and sports. And he took my call a couple months later, and he introduced me to some people, and he saw something in me in that 2 minutes. But the hardest part of getting into business then, like, there was no LinkedIn or text messages or emails. Like, you had to call people on the phone. It was different, you know, and dating myself, but that was the reality. But he saw something in me, and to this day, I have a great relationship with him. He actually wrote a college sports book and came to Rutgers and spent time there during the Big Ten to learn about it. And then there were two other guys, Jonathan Leese and Keith Ritter, my two first bosses. Jonathan was the head of program or head of production planning at ABC Sports. Keith ran marketing. They were charged with starting ABC Sports' online presence. I had a 16-minute interview with them, thanks to Armen Keteyian, and they saw something in me and gave me a shot. I had zero experience, zero idea. I'm not even sure what I said in the interview. I took the job without even asking how much it paid. But those two guys really took a chance on me, and to this day, I'm in touch with these people, and I'm grateful.
Let's go back to the current situation. IMG Academy. How many employees, how many students on campus?
So the physical IMG Academy is now more of an enterprise than it is a physical place. 3 years ago, the Academy was a physical destination with around 1,000 full-time students in the boarding school and 5,000 or 6,000 students, or not students, campers going to camp there, with 1,000 employees. The physical academy now has more than 1,100 employees, 1,500 students in the boarding school, close to 10,000 young people going to camp there. But 3 years ago, we looked at it and we said, and my partner Brent Richard and I and our other partner Ted Sullivan, we looked at it and said, how do we make this more of an experience versus a destination? And now the place is a suite of services. You can experience the physical destination. You can have mental conditioning or mindset conditioning for your young athlete digitally and virtually anywhere in the world. We acquired a recruiting company called NCSA, which is now our recruiting solution. And think of it like LinkedIn for high school students. How do I connect with colleges and universities to get recruited? So now this is an experience. It's not just a destination. All combined, and I have oversight of the physical academy, there's more than 2,000 staff there.
Wow.
It has been a daunting leadership challenge, also because you have people that do very specialized things in their area.
So you take over. Managing change is an art form. And you had experience managing change prior. How did you manage the change in taking over IMG when you had no experience with IMG prior?
Yeah, but the closest experience I had to being in that type of environment was when I was at Rutgers, because you have student athletes, you have a school, but this is way different. Like, you're dealing with young people. Like, college athletes are young people, but you're dealing with 6th grade to 12th grade. It's a totally different dynamic. And you're dealing with parents that have seriously invested in the success of their young people in a boarding school and a sports environment. But my approach is the same everywhere I've gone that's been new. I spend the first 90 days listening. I'm out, I'm accessible, I meet with people, I listen, I ask questions. Everybody thinks a leader that asks questions is a loaded question. I actually ask questions because I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
But I spent 90 days really trying to understand the business, and I had a great team there that taught me the business, and then we were able to bring people along and say, there's a new way to go. Like, this will always be core to what we do, but we can take this, we can create a customer base outside of the physical destination. We have experts inside the walls. Let's take them outside the walls and see what we can do with it. This acquisition by EQT and our future collaboration with their owned property, Nord Anglia Education. Nord Anglia is a massive global leader in education. Now suddenly we're at the table with 83 other boarding schools, like the collaboration academically, matriculation of students, sports. They have these similar relationships with Juilliard and with MIT. I think the next chapter of this thing is going to be fantastic because it's not anything anybody imagined at IMG Academy 10 years ago.
Well, and I love the listening part of it because you really have to kind of lay the groundwork before you know what kind of decisions you need to make. So,
yeah, being that leader that is vulnerable, that admits that you don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
I think people lean into that and respect that, and then you put the right, cast the vision, you drive the culture, and you engage in large business transactions, and that seems to be exactly what you've done at IMG.
Yeah, I'm pinching myself a little bit on this last one because when I came to IMG in 2015 to run the college business, which was a commercial business, and we sold it a few years later, I was pinching myself on that. This one is different. I never really envisioned this happening at the Academy, and I don't think my partners there did either, but leadership is listening. If you're not listening, then you can't be a good leader. Every great idea doesn't come out of who's in charge. People forget that. And vulnerability, like what you said, Matt, I think there's a lot of leaders, and I've worked for some, like they want you to think they don't eat, they don't sleep, they never get sick. It's just not reality. Like I think it's the way I was raised in a very tight-knit Italian family in North Jersey. Like we wear it on our sleeve. And I think if you are real with people, and you are who you are at work, at home, or anywhere else, it inspires people and they let their guard down. I think the number one rule is when we have young leaders in any business I've been in, they say, help me understand. I say, be accessible. Be visible, be accessible. Make sure people feel like they can approach you and talk to you, even if it's a personal issue. But being accessible, I think, is the number one rule. It's hard. Like some days it's actually impossible.
To do that, you have to have a really good team around you and delegate so it frees you up to be accessible. And I think some CEOs, presidents, feel that if they're not busy, they feel guilty. They operate out of fear, obligation, guilt. I'm obligated to do this job. I'm afraid what other people think. I'm guilty about delegating, and now I don't have a full calendar, but by having an open calendar, you become accessible.
100%. And by the way, if you're going to hire good people around you, there's two schools. Number one is I'm going to surround myself with good enough people and I'm going to drive the bus. My thing is like get great people that want your job or could do your job and cut them loose. Like set expectations, be very, very clear about what you need them to do and then cut them loose.
Yeah.
And some that like don't feel comfortable cut loose, they come in like, Tim, what do you think? I'm like, get out. Go make the decision. Like you have the job for a reason. I'll give you advice, but I'm not going to make the decision for you. People feel so empowered by that. And honestly, going back to small things, a core of good leadership, at least in my book, is recognition. Like everybody wants to make more money. Everybody wants to get paid. That's reality. But you'd be amazed by the power of a handwritten note, or the power of a phone call, or me calling a young sales executive like I did 2 weeks ago who made his first sale and grabbing a cup of coffee with him and getting to know who he is. Recognition means everything to people.
I'd like to maybe put a bow on this as I think the 50-yard walk.
Are we going to cut a deal, do a book here?
I've been talking to my attorney in the last 10 minutes. I got a patent on it now, so I'll sell it to you. Okay. Just go back to that 50-yard walk and think of where you are now. Mm-hmm. Did you ever think you'd be in this position?
No.
Back then?
No. Absolutely not.
And you wouldn't be in this position without that experience at Rutgers, that 50-yard walk.
100%. Listen, you have to take some learning from every situation, good or bad. Because most people are like, that was bad, I'm closing the door. I'm not talking about it again, I'm not going to think about it again. But you can't develop as an individual or as a leader or as a person without reflecting on some of the stuff that was hard. And what I always say, because I have a young son who's in college who wants to be in sports and one who's already in sports. And what I say is, if you want to play at a high level, be prepared to get caught holding the bag at some point. That's the reality. I know it's something you can identify with in your career.
Yeah.
It's the reality. But it can't be a deterrent from wanting to continue to pursue, because grit is everything in this business.
Yeah.
It just separates a big group of people from a small group of people.
Really good advice. A good way to end it. Thank you so much, Tim.
Thank you for having me. This was great.